Welcome back to the Daughter Arise channel. My name is Yvonne Ellis and this channel is all about bringing you news and content surrounding childhood sexual abuse. If you haven't been on this channel before, welcome. Be sure to check out my other videos. I talk about a range of different topics and issues surrounding childhood sexual abuse. That could be sharing things from my own experiences or giving voice to other survivors' stories, commenting on news stories or documentaries that come up in the media. It's all about giving voice to survivors, and that could be male or female survivors. It is about giving voice to those who feel that they cannot have a voice. And I share everything on this channel in the hopes of inspiring and encouraging other survivors that it's okay to come forward, it is okay to acknowledge what has gone on with you, that you can break free of the lies of sexual abuse. So I wanted to do a video today about some of my struggles with parenting after sexual abuse. I feel it's really important to talk about this because many people struggle with it as parents. Some of you are watching this video might not even be a parent yet, but it's something maybe you think about that in terms of when you become a parent you might feel might become a problem for you. Many survivor parents, there's a lot of fears and insecurities and issues that come up after you have your own child, and this could be even a mother or a father. This is something that just happens. And you know, even though my two children, one being 25, I have a 12-year-old as well, are now grown up. My older daughter, I've been estranged from 10 years now, and it's something that I talk about in my autobiography, Daughter Arise, which was released in 2010, about what happened with my sexual abuse, the challenges in the aftermath, things I went through in the aftermath, and how I overcame them, how I am able to function in the aftermath of them. So I'll leave a link to that book in the description box below, but it's something that I talk about in there, you know, some of my challenges and struggles in being a parent. And you know, it's been a very, very tough journey for me. It's been a journey where even though today I would consider myself a functioning, loving parent, in both circumstances I did the best that I could with what I knew at the time. I still feel there is a part of me that feels that I am not a good parent, and I think that's something that is always going to be there for me. It's one of those things that I have thought about a lot, and it's probably one of the things that I think prevented me from having any more children, because I didn't feel that I was adequate enough to be a parent. You know, both of my children live very, very functionable lives, you know, both productive young girls. I loved them, I affirmed them, I spoke life into them, telling them, you know, they're beautiful, I loved them. I looked after their practical and physical needs, their spiritual needs, but there is still a part of me that feels that in some way, shape or form, that I will never be a very good parent. And I can only put that down to my experiences of going through sexual abuse as a child and the impressions it left on me. Now, that doesn't mean that I believe now that I will be the parent that my mother and father was to me. That's not what I believe now. But back when I was parenting at 17 years old, fresh out of the care system, living with a foster parent, dealing with depression and so many different things, I didn't think that. I hadn't even got to a point at 17 when I had the baby, my daughter, where I was even dealing with my abuse, dealing with all the aftermath that it left behind. It was until I was 22 years old when I had my first nervous breakdown that I started to address those issues, but I didn't do it up to that point. You know, I went through a lot of depression, there was a lot of things going on. When I had my daughter at 30, you know, I was still having bouts of depression. I was now a year married to my husband. I'm now 8 years into dealing with the issues left behind from sexual abuse. But what I found was it didn't matter about the life circumstances of whether I had my children, whether I had my children in a broken relationship or in marriage, whether I was 17 or 30, whether I dealt with my abuse, not dealt with my abuse or not. There were certain things that was both similar in both of my experiences. One of the issues that I found with both of my daughters is that I was overcompensating a lot with them. I felt I had to go over and beyond to show that I was a good parent. And it wasn't what they were saying to me. It wasn't about whether they felt their needs were being met or not, because the truth was their needs were being met. It was about my fear of not being a good parent. It wasn't about them. It was just about the fact that I was just overcompensating, feeling that I had to prove that I could be this parent. And I don't know if it's something, if you're a parent, that you struggle with, but that is something that I did struggle with. So you know, I started to deal with that by just starting to address that in therapy. and started to affirm to myself that actually I am good enough as I am to be a parent. No one is a perfect parent. A lot of us didn't come from a background where we had parents that showed us the right model to be a parent. And even then, even if they did show that to us, this is based upon their own perceptions of being a parent. I just knew that, you know, I had to get to a place where I had to be okay with my parenting. And that also came through building my confidence and self-esteem, just being able to just know that I am doing the best job that I can with what I have, the knowledge I have, the skills I have. And the rest of it I just put into prayer and gave to God, because for me my faith has been central to everything. And what I couldn't do, or what I felt I wasn't doing, I would just ask God for help. But I struggled with saying no. And again, that stemmed from my own childhood of having my dad override my boundaries, override and violate my right to say no. So it's something that I struggled with, not just in parenting, in relationships. It was something that I struggled with all across the board. But with both of my daughters, I struggled with being able to say no. I felt I was a bad parent if I said no to them about certain things. But I had to learn, and you know, this again came through just therapy and developing confidence in saying no about the small things, that I was able to start saying no about the big things as well. Because saying no didn't mean that I didn't love my children. Saying no actually means that I do love my children, because I'm not going to put them in harm's way by knowing something is harmful to them and not saying something about it. So saying no was something that was very difficult to me, and it was almost like this cycle that if I said no and I felt guilty about it, then I would try and overcompensate. It was just really just a real big difficulty for me. But now I can say that I can do that confidently, but it took a long time. I was very overprotective. This is another thing that I struggled with both of my daughters, very overprotective of them, to the point where you could probably say it was probably a bit controlling. I was very fearful that if they were out of my sight, that they would be sexually abused, that something bad would happen to them. I was hyper vigilant, and anybody that's been through sexual abuse, well, most people, I don't know if you would agree with me, but most people that I know that have gone through sexual abuse as a child are hyper vigilant and overprotective when it comes to their children. Because the biggest fear for us, the biggest fear for me, was that my daughters would be sexually abused. And my daughters have never been sexually abused, but that was a very, very real fear for me. It was a real fear for me because of that helplessness I felt as a child. Because my mum didn't seem to be taking any notice, you know, it all kind of fed into this fear of this overprotectiveness. Now, I had to learn to get a measured balance in sense of dealing with my children, because they are entitled to have a childhood, and that childhood should be for them something that is based upon my ability to be able to just provide those experiences and give them those experiences, but not based from my fears, not based from the fears of my own childhood. Now, that doesn't mean to say that I wasn't putting in safety measures and things that would help them, to protect them. No, it doesn't mean that. I had to get a measured sense of protection over them. So even things like going to parties, I would meet the parents, I would allow them to go to parties. My daughter, my 12-year-old now, you know, she goes for, goes to see her friends. And, you know, me and my husband, we discuss these decisions together, you know, where she goes and how long she goes for, and also teaching her about personal safety, personal boundaries, keeping herself safe. I've had these conversations with both of my daughters. If anybody touches you anywhere, tells you anything, no matter what they say to you, you can tell me. It's something that you can tell me about, making them know nobody should be touching them in any places and that they should tell me. You know, it's about giving them those kind of tools for personal safety, and also teaching them how to keep themselves safe when they're away from me, and also letting them have measured freedom. So there's certain places that my 12-year-old can't go, certain times that she can't go certain places, but having that kind of sensible compromise that allows her to experience the normal things that a childhood should entail, but also as well keeping her safe. My mum, as a child, she was exactly the same. She was very, very overprotective over us. We weren't allowed to go in people's houses. We weren't really allowed to go to parties. So that was one of the things I think that made me feel that actually my mum must have been sexually abused or something bad happened to her because of how she was with us. There were times where I would become emotionally distant, and there would be times where it was almost like at times like I could choose when I wanted to hug and love them, but then if they were unexpectedly sometimes to come into my space, I would have difficulties dealing with that. And you know, I was an affectionate and loving parent, but that is something that I did really struggle with. And there was a particular age with both of my children that I struggled with this, and that was when they were 9 years old. I was at that age when I was sexually abused, and almost I became very emotionally distant at that age with both of my daughters, because it was almost like looking 3D like at my children and seeing them how I must have been at 9 years old, young, vulnerable, carefree, just totally innocent, and seeing how they developed and everything else. I found it very, very troubling. I found it triggering. I found it upsetting. I found myself asking why my mum didn't protect me. Why didn't she look out for me at this age? And, you know, I had to learn to push past those feelings. And I had to work through it in therapy, and I recognised it, but I still struggled with it when they both hit 9 years old. So one of the things that I did was, when I felt that time where I was becoming emotionally distant from my children, I would take the initiative and push myself into the situation. So if I felt like I didn't want to be touched or hugged, and it's important for me to say to you at this point, it's something that I struggled with in my relationships as well, that emotion, becoming emotionally, allowing people to get emotionally near me, to become, you know, attached to me. It's something that I struggled with all across the board. But when it came to my children, I had to learn to just push past those fears, allow them to hug me, hug them first, you know, take the fear out of that situation for me, the distance out of that situation, by initiating that situation with them, hugging them, loving them, you know, and stuff. And also telling myself that I am not my mum, that the way that I parent, in all these things that I've shared with you today, one of the main things I had to say is that I am not going to parent like my mum. And that was not trying to be disrespectful to her, because she had her own issues. She went through her own abuse. She went through her own things. So she parented the way she felt was the best way to parent. And she was a good parent in the sense that she looked after my practical needs. There's many things that she taught me during my childhood that have been invaluable in me raising my own family. But emotionally, these are the things that I inherited, which were not good for me and good for how I brought up my children. So I almost had to tell myself, I am not going to repeat the things that my mother did. I am going to parent from a way that I can parent and do it to the best of my ability. And I had to develop self-esteem and confidence in that. No matter what inadequacy I felt, I had to develop that. And you know, it's something that I'm still doing today. As I shared at the beginning of this video, there are times where I still feel, no matter what I do, there is this little sense within me that I feel that am I an adequate parent? It's something that I think will always be there just because of the scar of my experience. But that doesn't mean that I'm not going forward and trying to be the best parent I can be. If you want to contact me at info@daughterarise.org.uk, feel free to do that. Or in your city or area, see if there's a support line or a parenting line that can help you. I don't know if there is any groups out there, and it's something I'm actually thinking of doing over here with Daughter Arise, is to do a parenting group for survivors of sexual abuse as well, because there was lots of different issues that come up. The best piece of advice I can give you is to love your children from your heart, and just start to develop that confidence in knowing that you are being the best parent that you can be. None of us are perfect parents, as I said. No one knows if we're going to get it right or not. It's a trial and error thing with parenting. But we can learn from our experiences. That's one thing I really do believe. We can learn from our experiences. There are things that we have gone through that we can see probably wasn't right. We can learn from them. We can adjust our way of doing things from them. It doesn't matter if you've been overprotective, you have trouble saying no, you feel triggered or have emotional attachment issues to your children. Try and just do the best from where you are. And the biggest thing I would say to you as well is to face whatever fears it is head on. Write down those fears if you can. Write down what's the worst thing you feel will come about those fears. You know, it's okay to feel fearful, but it's what you do with that fear. Don't allow it to box you in and make you live in this prison because of your own experiences. You know, because your children need to have their own experience of childhood, and I think that's really important.